It's all happening now in the United States. Voting has started. We've joined by two very special guests. Matt Klink is a Republican strategist, and Scott Bolden is a former chairperson of the Democratic Party. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for being with us. Matt Klink, let me come to you first. Right till the end, Trump maintained his aggressive style. The language used was true Trump. It was pretty direct. He kept taking on Biden, Kamala Harris as well, whereas Kamala Harris was fairly muted and focused more on issues. Do you believe that this aggression or this Trump style will take him to the White House?
Absolutely. Look, I think that this election, we've said all along, is a turnout election, meaning that both Republican and Democratic candidates are doing whatever they feel that they need to do to get their voters, whether frequent or, more importantly, infrequent voters, to the polls. And I think Trump closed on a strong note over the last 2 days. He said that Americans face a choice between staying the course for 4 more years of the failed Biden and Harris administration or change. And change, as we know what the difference is going back to what the Trump economy was and a much safer world under a President Donald Trump than it certainly has been under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
All right, Jake Novak with us. Thanks, Jake, very much for being with us. At the end of the day, what is the primary couple of issues? I know there are so many, but when a voter goes in to vote in the United States, some would suggest that the primary issue is that of the economy. Some would suggest that inflation, the rising costs, that's something which is paramount. And therefore, it's the economic policy of both Kamala Harris and Trump which are key. Would you agree?
I would agree, and I think you have to get a little bit more specific, and you need to add a multiplier. It is inflation. It can't just be the economy. Inflation, in my lifetime, killed off 3 presidents in a row, Nixon, Ford, and Carter. It was mostly under control in all the years since Jimmy Carter left office. That's 44 years ago. But we've had a massive upturn in it, and it doesn't matter what party you're from. It doesn't matter your previous record. If inflation is hurting Americans while you're president or while your administration is in power, you're probably going to lose. So I think that's the number one issue. However, it has been multiplied by the fact that we also have had an open border for the last 3.5 years. And we've been told by economists for years that an open border would reduce inflation. It would lower wages. And that hasn't happened. So it's been a perfect storm of problems for the existing administration. The only reason why this election is close is because Kamala Harris has been vice president, mostly unknown, and she's not the president. Had she been the president, I think this would be a clearer outcome that we could expect tonight.
Well, let's go across to Mr. A. Scott Bolden. Thank you, sir, very much for being with us. The polls themselves have obviously a margin of error, but it seems at this juncture that it's just very, very narrow, a 1 or 2% gap. Now, do you believe the polls that we've seen right up to this point, Ipsos had what, a 2% lead for Kamala Harris, or do you believe that it's all up in the air at this stage?
I couldn't really make out your question, but I think I got it. The race is close for a lot of different reasons. If inflation, the economy, immigration. Listen, Biden administration has a lot of statistics to show that they've improved the economy from the COVID economy inherited by Donald Trump 4 years ago. But people aren't feeling it, if you will. And they're showing that they're not feeling it. And while the Republicans blame Biden-Harris blamed the COVID economy and Donald Trump's mismanagement of it. But it is a close race, 50-48. We're not looking at polls anymore. I think your other guest said, this is about getting out the vote. It's election day. I just voted. And whoever has the better organization of getting all your votes out is probably going to win this election. We may not know who the winner is this evening. Maybe we'll know this week. But the bottom line is get out the vote. And the real difference on this approach by the parties, the Democrats are expanding their coalition to include conservatives, conservative women, moderate conservatives, if you will, to expand that coalition. Donald Trump's not trying to expand his coalition. He's trying to energize his base and then get low propensity voters that come out and vote who share his personality, who don't have a problem with his chaos or his criminal conduct or anything else that comes along with a really disturbing personality. You got to choose whether you're going to go forward with Kamala Harris and the future of America or you're going to go back to Donald Trump and the chaos that comes with his leadership. We've lived through that once. I'm thinking the majority of the voters are going to move forward, but we'll have to see. It's a tight race for a reason because America is very divided right now. We'll see.
Well, joining us now, Congressman Raja Krishna, the Democratic representative of Illinois. Thanks very much, Mr. Krishna, for being with us. Are you, in a sense, relieved that, look, it's all over? In a sense, I mean, the hectic campaigning, you can say whatever you want, your opponents can say whatever they want, but look, it's the American voter which is going to decide which way it's going to go, one way or the other. Are you, in that sense, a little relieved, or are you extremely tense at this stage?
No, I think we're expectant. We're looking forward to victory tonight. I myself am on the ballot. I'm seeking a contract extension for a 5th term as a U.S. congressman, and I hope to get my high five, so to speak, from my voters. And I think Kamala Harris is going to become the first Desi president of the United States as well.
Some of my panelists were suggesting that, look, it is the economy at the end of the day. Of course, the other issues are important: healthcare, foreign policy, abortion, immigration. But, it's rising costs which are a huge concern. Do you share that opinion that in as much as we can discuss the other issues, for Kamala Harris, it is the issue of the economy in various way, shape or form? That's what's going to decide where America is going.
I do think that people are very worried about kitchen table topics such as how do I afford higher education for my children? How do I gain access to quality, affordable health care? How do I get a job that can put me into the middle class? And they want to hear what each candidate has in store to address those issues. On the one hand, they hear Kamala Harris talk very specifically about how do they move their families forward. And on the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who really gets into a list of grievances. He has an enemies list. He talks about going after people in the administration. It's as Kamala Harris talked about the other day. On the one hand, we have an enemies list from Donald Trump, and then on the other hand, we have a to-do list with Kamala Harris. And I think people want someone to pursue their to-do list, and that's Kamala Harris.
Let's talk about a couple of important issues. Immigration. Trump was really hit out at Kamala Harris, saying that, she doesn't have the ability to govern border security, immigration policies, to handle the influx of migrants. How would you respond?
Well, two things. One, Donald Trump was the one who blocked the bipartisan immigration and border deal, which would have been an incredible deal. But he decided to block it because he wanted to deny Joe Biden a political victory. So he wants to run on a problem as opposed to solve it. So the first thing is we need to put that particular border deal on the table for a vote. And I believe that Kamala Harris will sign that into law. The second thing is you should know that there are millions of legal immigrants who are in queue, including millions of Indian nationals who are H-1B visa holders and others who can't matriculate into green card status, again, because Republicans are blocking this legislation. Why do I know this? Because it's my legislation. It's my bills that are getting blocked by Republicans for consideration. So Kamala Harris and Democrats are going to move forward on that legislation finally. And I'm very hopeful that not only will we get a secure border and immigration deal because of Kamala Harris, but we'll also be able to move forward on this vital legislation, which will help our economy grow and help many, many, many Indian nationals become green card holders over time as well.
Let's talk about one of the biggest issues, in your campaign, the rights of women, reproductive rights, abortion. How important is this for you and for Kamala Harris, winning the vote of women and certainly raising this as a larger human rights issue?
It's monumentally important. When I go and knock on doors and talk to even Republican women and independent voters, this is one of those issues that cause them to say, look, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris. I may not put a yard sign out advertising my support for Kamala Harris, but I'm going to vote for her nonetheless when I go into the voting booth. And I think that's why you're seeing such a surge in momentum for Kamala Harris in these final days. In Iowa, which is a solidly red state, recently the gold standard of pollsters, Ann Seltzer, showed that Kamala Harris has surged to the lead. This surprised everybody. But it doesn't surprise those of us who are talking to voters every day and asking them, where do they stand? And the late breaking votes seem to be going to Kamala Harris, in part because of this reproductive rights issue, which at the end of the day is about gender equality, which obviously the majority of the electorate feels personally in their everyday lives, since the majority of the electorate are women.
Let's talk a little bit about foreign policy. Obviously, that's key to, I'm not sure that decides US elections, but it's certainly a factor in the US elections. There's a war happening in West Asia. There's a war happening in Europe right now. There are many who feel that it's time that America stop supporting Ukraine. The war over there needs to come to an end. The Democrats have felt that, no, you just need to continue going against Russia. Do you believe that this could be something which goes against your potential voters?
No, I think this is something that in my district, for instance, the vast majority of my constituents support us assisting Ukraine. Remember, Ukraine is an independent sovereign nation that was attacked by Russia, and we are going to stand for democracy. We're going to stand for their sovereignty. It's the same principle, by the way, which we ask other countries to observe, including the Chinese Communist Party. Remember, in the Indo-Pacific region, China feels that it can somehow unilaterally change borders wherever it wants, whether it's Himachal Pradesh or whether it's Taiwan, whether it's in the South China Sea or whether it's in other parts of Asia. And so what we are saying is, no, you must negotiate everything at the bargaining table with your neighbors. You can't throw your elbows militarily and try to change borders and change what had been pre-existing agreements. And the same holds true with regard to Ukraine. That is the principle at stake, and that is the principle that Americans want to uphold throughout the world.
I must ask you, you are one of the leading Indian, congressmen of Indian origin. We've seen Indians do so well in so many walks of life in the United States. Could you, and don't talk just as a Democrat leader, but tell us a little bit about the experience of people of Indian origin doing so well of late in the US election process?
Well, I think that Indian Americans, like other groups, have finally arrived in so many regards. They are the fastest growing ethnic minority in the country, one of the most prosperous and best educated. They have established themselves financially. They're giving back to the community in so many ways. And so now they are obviously contributing to the civic life of this country. I'm one of 5 Indian Americans in Congress, all Democrats. I affectionately have called us the Samosa Caucus, yes. And that label has stuck. But as I said many times, we need more samosas, we need more pakoras, we need more of everybody, because when Congress looks like America, it performs better.
All right, Congressman Raja Krishna, thank you very much for being with us, and good luck with the elections up ahead and the results, which should be out this time tomorrow. We should have a clear idea. Let's go across to Matt Klinker, Republican strategist, who's with us. Matt, thank you very much for being with us. You heard what the congressman had to say. On the issue of abortion, let's start focusing on that. Do you believe that that could be a game changer as far as these elections are concerned? Reproductive rights and the vote of women, could that be the clincher?
No, clearly it is an issue, but it is not the issue this election cycle. We know that the economy, as we've spent more time talking about, is a huge issue. Look, I do think one thing that is relevant, that the news talks a lot about the gender gap, that a lot of women are voting for Kamala Harris. The gender gap in the other direction for Republicans is even more extreme than the gender gap for Democrats. Joe Biden is capturing 60% or 58% of the male vote compared to 40%. So look, that's going to be an issue. I think immigration, and certainly in these 7 swing states that everybody is talking about, that's going to be more important than the abortion issue. And again, countering what the congressman said and what Mr. Bolden said, both of whom are very smart individuals, but respectfully, I believe that they're wrong that people are going to evaluate, and they are not better off today than they were 4 years ago. And that is in part because of epic failures of the Biden and Harris administration, both domestically and internationally.
Jake Novak, is it your sense that the swing states, I mean, everybody's focus has been on the swing states. It's going to go right down to the wire, and whoever's going to win more swing states is going to win the elections, right? It's as simple as that.
It really is. But the thing is this, you could have somebody like Donald Trump win all 7 of the key swing states, and the total aggregate the total number of votes in the margin will be probably less or around 100,000 votes. So that's how close it is. However, I do think that I also disagree with the congressman. We have a lot of what he said. I'm sorry, it was not just incorrect. I think it was disingenuous. First of all, the swing in momentum for the last several weeks has been very clearly going towards Donald Trump. Every poll says that, and not every poll is going to be wrong. Second of all, he has expanded his base. Donald Trump is going to get a record number of Muslim, Desi, Jewish votes for a Republican candidate, at least for the last 40 years. That base has expanded, and it's all because of the first reason that we talked about. It's because of the economy. When I mentioned those groups in America, many of them are small business owners. All of them have to pay their bills. You cannot be in an existing administration in America during a time of inflation and expect to have any chance to win. It'll be close because America is very divided, as we all agree. That's one thing we all agree on. But I think it'd be very blind and disingenuous, very disingenuous, to say that the trend hasn't been going towards Donald Trump for the last several weeks.
No,
That's clear and demonstrable.
But Mr. Novak, if you take a look at the last Ipsos poll, they had Kamala Harris about 2% ahead, and that's the latest poll. I do know that there were a couple of polls.
Yeah, but that's not how we play.
You know, I mean, which have gone the other way as well.
Yeah, that's not how we play the game here in America. We don't elect people by the popular vote, and a Democratic candidate, because of their large majorities in states like California, they have to win the popular vote by at least 3 points to win our election, because we have the Electoral College, it's the states. And most of the polls show actually an even smaller gap, or Trump leading in the popular vote. If Kamala Harris loses the popular vote or is only ahead by 1 or 2 points, she's losing the election. That is also an objective fact.
Scott Bolden, you know, in terms of the polls themselves, at this stage with this election expected to be as close as what most believe it's going to be, do you believe that these polls are essentially irrelevant?
I think the polls are a snapshot in time. And I think we're all living in a fallacy if we think we can prognosticate how close or how far apart we're going to be. For example, one of my colleagues on this panel was talking about Donald Trump and been surging. Donald Trump's been recovering, actually, from the gap that Kamala Harris has been expanding her coalition for, including conservative and moderate Republican women who care about reproductive rights. I agree with my colleagues that the economy and inflation is a big issue, and every president, I think most in my lifetime, have not won an election when the inflation has been as high. Now here you have other factors. Inflation is down. The Democrats inherited a COVID economy. This great economy the Republicans keep talking about is an economy that was pre-COVID that was completely mismanaged by Donald Trump. He denied it for years, and then the Democrats inherited it. They had to pump money into the economy, and then you got inflation. And so it is what it is. No president single-handedly can fix inflation. And then lastly, let me just say this. I think it's still going to be tight no matter what. But the Republicans are delusional if they think that Muslims and other minority groups or people of color are going to give Donald Trump their vote. Donald Trump proposed a Muslim ban. And if it wasn't for the Supreme Court and federal court, we would have a Muslim ban in this country from 2016 to 2020. And even if he's going to break those numbers, okay, but it won't be enough to make a difference. Most of those voters are going to lean towards Democrats and going to vote Democrat. And again, it's about get out the vote. Can Donald Trump get low propensity voters and his MAGA supporters to come out in major numbers and catch lightning in a bottle like he did in 2016? Or can the Democrats, given the abortion issue and given going forward versus going backward, and given making history with the first African-American South Asian president of the United States, do they want to go forward with that? And my gut is, given the high voter turnout pre-election turnout, early voting, those are Democratic votes. There's some Republicans in there, no doubt about it, but a lot of those are Democratic votes. And so we'll have to see, but we're betting on democracy. If you don't care about Donald Trump's personality, you're going to vote for Donald Trump.
All right,
you don't
Scott
care
Bolden,
about character,
you've been smiling and nodding,
you're
and
going to vote for Kamala Harris.
all right, Scott Bolden, go ahead. Yes.
No, I finished. I said,
Sorry.
if you don't care about character.
Matt
you don't
Klink,
care
go ahead.
about
Sorry.
personality,
Apologies, Matt
you're
Klink, go
gonna
ahead.
vote
Yeah.
for Donald Trump.
Well,
If you care about those
what
things,
you
you're
just
gonna vote
what
for
you
Kamala
just
Harris.
heard from Scott is the Democrat filibuster because they know that they're between a rock and a hard place. Kamala Harris has not closed the deal. She has done a fairly decent job about trying to stigmatize Donald Trump, calling him a fascist and a Nazi and a threat to democracy.
He
But
called himself
Americans
that.
are hurting.
He calls
Everything,
himself that.
Scott, you had your filibuster. Let me talk now, please. Or as Kamala would say, I'm talking. So look, the reality is that everything in America costs more because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. The world is in a weaker spot because of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And she could giggle and cackle her way to talking about the future. But the reality is that most of America looks at her as unable and incapable of leading America forward because she shouldn't even be on the ballot. She has never been tested. And look, I don't even think it's going to be that close tonight. I think that the Republicans are going to win overwhelmingly. We're going to take the Senate for sure. And the House, I think, is going to fall in line pretty quickly.
All right.
And then we'll see what happens.
Okay, gentlemen, I'm out of time, but we'll know in just the next couple of hours where this is all headed. Thank you, Jake Novak, A. Scott Bolden, and Matt Klink, very much for being with us. Thank you very much indeed. It's an election that the entire world is watching. We're going to take a short break. We've got our reporters across the United States tracking every bit of this. We'll go across to them. There's a lot more coming up right here on NDTV.